Hi, Disruptors. Thank you for coming to our cybersecurity event. I wanted to introduce you, thank you to our sponsors, Esther Dyson for supporting our Disruptive Technologists monthly newsletter, Microsoft Reactor for supporting our mission, Uplex offices, who are giving away 5 webinar attendees will get 2-day free passes to use global offices. And all you have to do is send in your name, your title, and your company to info@disruptivetechnologists.com. We also have Rebecca Costa, who's giving away her books, On the Verge and The Watchman's Rattle. Same, just send in your name. What we do is we put it into a bowl. We print out the emails and we put it into a bowl. And we just pick randomly. And I wanted to thank Zeotag. They're a video production company that tags your videos so that they give you a table of contents and you can then just screen to whatever area you want. So you don't have to watch the whole boring video. And I want to give you a heads up, and Oliver will reiterate this at the end, about the Fireside chat next Wednesday at 6 o'clock. It's July 14th, same time, just 1 hour. If you don't have time to get all your questions answered, we'll answer those in a week from now. And Oliver is our AI expert, and he's also our moderator for our Disruptive Technologists. And welcome. Thanks, Oliver. And thanks to everyone for joining. We're so excited to have you. Go for it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for joining on this talk on cybersecurity, where we are at the moment and what we could be doing better. So there's a global cyber attack happening right now, so not all of our panelists can make it, but nonetheless, we have 2 fantastic speakers, which I'll introduce you to at the moment. So what's happening this year? We have enterprise security really failing to what it should be doing. US oil pipeline has been disrupted. The Irish ambulance service had to go offline. Schools are offline in New Zealand at the moment, and Swedish supermarkets are closed. So apologies to my brother there. 1,500 companies being attacked right now, this very second. And they're being attacked by a private Russian-speaking ransomware as a service company or organization called REvil. Rather uniquely, they have both a public relations department and a Wikipedia page. So I think the landscape is changing. So without further ado, I'll let the 2 fantastic panelists tonight introduce themselves. Minerva, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Minerva Tantoco. I've been a disruptive technologist since the 1980s. I started my first AI company in 1985. I've had a very long career in technology. I have 4 US patents in artificial intelligence. I've started 3 startups, and I've also been a CTO at Merrill Lynch and UBS, both here and in Asia Pac. Recently co-founded a digital commercial bank here in New York City, and currently working at the Commons Project, a nonprofit tech for good. We're currently focused on health data and helping economies reopen with privacy preserving health data sharing services. So really great to be here. Looking forward to our conversation. Cybersecurity is very top of mind, as Oliver pointed out.
Fantastic. Imran.
Hey, thank you for having me. Imran is my name. I am an electronics engineer and lucky enough to have attended Columbia University in the city of New York for my MBA. My background in technology and business is also built on top of a career in entrepreneurial efforts throughout my life. My claim to fame, at least last century, was that I am the father of the internet and internet email in Pakistan, as some call me, and I joke that unlike Al Gore, I am the father of the internet, at least in Pakistan. Since the last about 30 years, my partner and I own and run the .pk CCTLD. So if you're looking to buy Oliver.pk, you know who to call. But additionally, I also launched the credit card industry in Pakistan, which was no mean feat, considering it's an Islamic country that doesn't allow interest to be charged or paid. So try starting credit cards there. The reason I mention that is that I'm always driven by how can we use technology to make the world a better place for people around the world, not just for a select few as it was back in the 80s. And today, we're here to discuss how to make it a more secure place for everybody. Thank you.
So I thought I'd ask a simple question to begin with. Why cybersecurity? What led you to start in this field?
Oliver, I hate to interrupt you, but Ryan joined us.
Oh, fantastic, Ryan! Well done. Great to have you here. Well, Ryan, do you want to jump in and give a quick introduction as well?
Yes, absolutely. So sorry about being late there. Had some hiccups. But yeah, I'm kind of an oddity in the cybersecurity field. Don't really have an academic background at all, nor a technologist background. I served in the Army for the last 8 years, 10 years or so. And the whole time that I was in the Army, I was working for 3-letter agencies within operation centers and whatnot. And then my background academic wise is I have a bachelor's degree in youth ministry, which, once again, kind of comes into where it's like, okay, how does this all work out? So my niche ended up being the kind of the psychology behind the persona of the hacker, right? And kind of knowing that how a person's mind works, kind of some of their idiosyncrasies, the things that might lead them to do the next step or try to backtrack. Well, if they're here, how did they get there? Those type of things. So it's kind of been an interesting ride, but cybersecurity is definitely a passion of mine. I've tried to utilize it to the best of possible purposes there. So
fantastic. Well, let's carry on. And Ryan, I'll stick with you for a second, but this is for all three panelists. What's the very first moment you thought, cybersecurity is interesting, this could be for me? And what was the first thing you did?
Okay, you want me to go first?
Yeah, why not?
Sure. So my biggest thing was being at a 3-letter agency in Hawaii. I walked into my newfound office and Army people sitting around, so I asked them, what do they do? And they're like, nothing. So then I went and asked a couple other people, hey, what are we supposed to be doing? They're like, you'll figure it out. And then I finally sat down and realized, hey, I'm going to have to teach myself. So I went and asked somebody else once again, hey, how do I teach myself? And they're like, just pay attention. So it really became that crucial moment of, wow, I'm really going to have to teach myself this. And I really have access to some of the smartest people in the world to do it. So that was it. And other than that, I've been all ears.
Fantastic. Minerva, what about you? Because you could have gone into AI, or do you think the two are complementary?
They're definitely complementary. But when when I first started thinking about cybersecurity, it was around credit card fraud. And, I got my very first credit card in my early 20s, and someone used it to rent a car in Oregon, a place I had not been at that time. And then, as we started to move into e-commerce in the mid 90s to the late 90s, it became a real issue, right? Because now the concept of online commerce very much brought to the fore the notion of digital identity, digital fraud, and there was money to be made, and so I was really baptized by the notion that there need to be secure payment rails and the ability to identify individuals online as far back as the early days of the web. And it's been a really fascinating trip. I neglected to mention that I was the first CTO of New York City from 2014 to 2016, and you know, so running the gamut from personal cybersecurity to sort of to the larger question of government system security, you know, is just an endless source of fascination. And you know, I think today with AI, the bad guys all have robots, right? So there are bad robots out there, and so we need the good robots to fight them off.
Absolutely. Well, we'll definitely come back to your time as a CTO of New York City and also banking as well. I think there's a nice mix there for, you know, the city as a whole. Imran, you have a great story, but what was the very earliest time you thought cybersecurity was important? What was that first spark?
So it's interesting that even though I've been in technology since literally the inception of the computing revolution as we know it, I consider myself a lifetime and a lifelong novice and student of InfoSec and cybersecurity because the field is so complex and the threat landscape growing so vast and deep at the same time that there's no way anybody can be really, at least I cannot be an expert. But the irony is that I found myself in the security realm even before the cyber piece had come in, because my partner and neighbor back then in Pakistan, in Lahore, Ashar, we actually created and sold the world's first antivirus software for PC called Zap. If you remember, there was something called the Brain virus that was the first PC virus. So we, and actually somebody who was a friend of ours in Lahore, so we ended up countering their work and doing the first antivirus. And so security was an element since then, because it really was almost like a ransomware attack. The first brain virus was actually something that would not let you log into your PC because it would show you a cookie monster, and you had to type in the word COOKIE to feed the cookie monster, and then he would let you log into the PC. So ransomware has been around since back then.
It's been around for a long time, absolutely.
Absolutely, and it's now just out of control. So that was the sort of the early security play. But then having launched the internet and the credit card industry in Pakistan, and also having the privilege of being the first person from the civilian side to have gone in to present and advise the top brass at the U.S. Space and Upper Atmosphere Missile Defense Command in a nameless mountain in Alabama somewhere back in the late 90s. That's when I basically was shocked when some of them were not really paying attention to the fact that China and other countries like that would be the next big threat to us, and it wouldn't be missiles, but basically payloads coming over the wire.
So actually sticking on this just for a second, and this again is for all three, and you come from very different places, different backgrounds. We have nation states now using cyber warfare as a proxy war. Do you think the US government could take a stronger role or position? I mean, can it do much in this situation, or is it is this the new normal? Imran, I know you've got some background in this, but I'd like all three of you to kind of come in with your experiences.
Thank you. That's such a great, complex question, but the simple answer is yes and yes. The US government has to do more about it, but keep in mind that we also have to be cognizant that all countries do this, and since we have greater technology capabilities, some of those same state actors can turn around to us and say, you guys started it, and you guys and gals actually. And so we have to sort of do a balancing act between what is our ability to secure ourselves, keep an ability to take down the resources or networks of our enemies in a
but that seems somewhat naive when the NSA had tools which are now out there in the open. You can't take them back.
Agreed.
Now, what's the solution? I mean, it's fantastically Windows has a clause in there that you can't use Windows on a foreign nuclear submarine. I mean, where can we go from here?
I think, keep in mind, there's always been war between empires and battles between empires, etc. So in the Cold War era, we had nuclear deterrence, we did nuclear tests, but nobody actually fired an actual missile at another superpower that had missiles, etc. You had Cold War spies.
I'll just stop you there. If we could jump over to Ryan. Ryan, you've been on the inside of this in a very different sort of way. What are you seeing? I mean, is this diplomatic solutions? Is it a technology solution? What do you think?
Well, I always break everything down to people, processes, and products, right? So with those three things, the people side is really, kind of what your question is based upon. And it comes at least from the US front, the NSA Cyber Command divide, right? So we have a lot of China, Russia, very much have this divide between their criminal organizations and their government-run organizations. But we also know that both of those countries, nothing happens without, government approval. Same way with Iran, right? So they can hide all they want as far as we didn't have anything to do with it, right? But as far as U.S., we do have very stringent authorities, and we exercise those authorities. And that's one of the fundamental training academic pieces whenever we're going through things is what is my authority to do here, and what am I allowed to do? And if I don't have the authority, the operation is nixed. So that was kind of the inception of Cyber Command, because we fight foreign adversaries with our military, right? We're diplomatic with our government agencies, but we fight with our military. So how do we give, these skill sets that NSA, CIA, FBI have to this military function? Insert Cyber Command. It's in its, infancy. It's still going, but they do have the authority. They're building up the skill set, and then people's process products. We'll get there eventually. Just slow steps.
Yeah. Do you feel it's a fair fight? I mean, do you feel the US has got the upper hand? And at the moment, do they just need more boots on the ground, as it were, more people with knowledge?
I definitely think it's a fair fight. We are the greatest nation in the world. We have the most resources, all those good things that you hear people talk about. But the reality is they've been doing this for a long time, right? Russia's had a deception office since I think 1923, possibly. China's been hacking the heck out of us for quite a while, stealing proprietary information, making their own version of it, and then going from there. But the reality is, yeah, we like I said, are in the infancy. We've got to build it up, and as it goes, it's gonna. I can't say it's gonna get to where kinetic warfare is, to where it's like countries are being destroyed or anything like that. But I mean, previous employer, I worked for. Yeah, I worked for.
Great segue.
I'd like to jump in real quick, because I think there's an element of this where there does need to be a public and private corporate cooperation, right? Because military targets, it may be a private company, right, that handles its own security. And so I think sort of some attention on not just cybercrime, but cyber terrorism and other forms of attacks, and how we're kind of dividing protection of US government systems versus protection of private corporate systems, right, or banks and things like that. I think we could start to look at things more holistically, right, and how we could work together, both public and private sectors, to protect our assets, which are both public and private assets. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like we're going from trust but verify to zero trust. Do you see that we might be moving towards an entirely private internet for this exact purpose? So you have something which is secure with good boundaries, or do you think that's never really going to happen?
Well, I think there are some private infrastructures out there, right? They're meant to be closed messaging systems, and you know, and the bad guys have those too, right? And so that which hinders surveillance and other kinds of things that you want to do. So it's a very tricky matter, but I do think that the notion of zero trust, given that the internet itself was designed to be open and fairly porous, there needs to be another design that is security preserving and yet still interoperable, right?
Now, you used to be CTO of New York City, which first is a fantastic job title, and the very first, which I think is fantastic. It looks like Eric Adams is most likely going to be the next mayor of New York. I mean, it's a strong projection. I think it's going to happen. What advice would you give him to make sure New York City, its infrastructure, its workings are more secure?
Well, I think some of those structures are in place. I think it would be really great, in addition to a CTO, which is a mayor's office, to establish a commissioner of technology, a deputy mayor for technology. I think that function of connecting the dots across the agencies. So we do have, of course, an incredible security group within NYPD, right? But we also need a security approach to our public hospitals, to our public housing. And so I think the notion that we need to protect all of our systems and assets holistically, it would be great to have a role there that is meant to connect the dots across a broader security strategy, not just protecting the the assets of the municipal government, but also protecting New Yorkers.
Speaking of New Yorkers, we're now all working from home, and we have been for some time, over a year. We're working from home. What advice would you give both the individual and also those companies about how to have better, more robust security without driving yourself crazy?
Well, I mean, I think my esteemed panelists would probably agree that working from home with bring your own device is probably a CISO's worst nightmare come true. There's hardly any way to know the security of the device that's being used, the network that's being used, and people were forced to work from home, and so much of the control that you have over your physical network and your physical building and space is just gone now. And so much more relies on the individual's work. I think, I think a lot of companies are still working through what those policies should be and how to enforce them on a work from home basis. I mean, I'm sure you both have some real ideas here, but as an individual, as an employee, and as an individual, just make sure that your network is secure. You have regularly changing passwords. You update all the patches at all times, and keep an eye out on for any unusual activity, and just expect to be hacked, basically.
Imran, now Microsoft, obviously a huge organization. A lot of people have been working from home way before this, but you've got a big shift. What's Microsoft's advice? And actually, what do you do personally at home to keep yourself secure?
That's that's a great question, Oliver, because technology companies in general, Microsoft in particular, and in my own case, all my sort of working life, I think I've only gone to an office 5 years of my working life. The rest has been, I have been able to work from home. The focus now is really about modern, secure, productive work from anywhere. and not just the home. So one of the things that ties this question to the one we were discussing earlier in terms of, for example, hardening the New York City infrastructure, et cetera, we're in a very complex time. The problem is, no matter how perfect, for example, the mayor and the office of the CTO in New York City make their infrastructure, it still does not ensure that New York City is safe. For example, the way our modern society operates, the telcos, the cell carriers, the internet providers, the self-driving cars, all the pieces of our modern life are built by companies and managed and monitored and controlled and even secured by different people in different organizations held to different standards and with different sort of psychological attitudes towards risk. That means you could still you could have a perfect city infrastructure and still be at a serious threat. That's why the role of the federal government.
You mentioned something interesting, which is standards. That we have different standards, we have different approaches to security. Everything from the Sony idea of security, which is to put your passwords in a folder which says passwords, to things which are really quite robust. Do you think it's time for a industry-led new standards led by Microsoft and others? Or, you know, I'm kind of surprised this hasn't happened so far.
So on the standards front, far smarter and better looking people than me at Microsoft and other companies, this is their bread and butter. This is what they live and breathe day in, day out. The problem is we are living in an industry, in a society, in a world where everything is evolving, and the more the technology gets powerful, the greater the acceleration of innovation. The greater the rate of innovation and new things and new products and new features, the greater the attack surface expands and the harder it becomes to have a standard. In the old days, you could say, hey, we all have, 32, whatever it was, 48-bit modems, kilobit modems. Yeah. Everybody will have the same standards. Today, your watch may have a different standard, a different designer, a different company, and then the apps on that. So the problem is, I don't think anybody can build a global standard of security for the planet. Each of the discrete pieces will have to be, improved and hardened every day, every minute. The mindset has to become security first. It literally has to be part of the inventor's mindset.
Actually, I'll just move over on that exact note. Brian, the US Army, the Defense Department, has a pretty good rule book on security and the do's and don'ts. What's been the most interesting things that you can share in terms of general approaches and ways to keep safe, that you keep safe there?
I would say the most interesting one that I saw recently only lasted about a week. It was literally, I think maybe a month, 2 months ago, where the US Army was going to say that all service, and remember, we have rights as US citizens, but once you join the United States military, you don't have those rights, So they wanted everyone to get rid of all IoT devices in their work from home environment, right? And it was just a general blanket, right? Mm-hmm. And it lasted about a week, 2 weeks, and they're like, okay, that wasn't a good idea. But the thing was, though, the letter of the law versus the intent of the law, right? That we always talk about with so many things is it didn't define environment, it didn't define IoT devices. It just kind of said, yeah, it would be safer if it was like this, right? But with that, moving back to the kinetic side of warfare, right? The reason that the United States military is so hard to fight is because we don't follow our own rule books, right? So the government says, or the military says, hey, this is what you need to do, this is what you don't need to do. And then we kind of follow we more follow the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the law. So with that in mind, going back to the original question, we all realize that, yeah, if we would eliminate the IoT device, we would all be safer. But then the thing that I've always kind of done in presentations and stuff is this spectrum of convenience versus security, right? And society pushes us towards the convenience. Connect this. one of my coworkers, he can look inside his refrigerator from the grocery store and see if he needs ketchup or not, right? Like, it's convenient, but is it secure, you know? And then you think about, well, I don't really care if a hacker looks inside my refrigerator, you know, granted. But then the security side, to where I think everybody as an individual really has to decide where they fall on that security convenience spectrum. And then they have to educate themselves through whatever medium they can to, you know, well, this is where I want to be on this spectrum. What does that actually mean to me in my personal life, my work from home environment, my IoT devices, right?
So actually, so on that exact note, how outside of work, how many devices do you have? How paranoid are you? Or rather, how paranoid should we be?
Yeah, so that's the other great question that I actually just, sorry, I had to swipe up on my phone. I just talked to somebody about this, right? Because I was raised, you know, cyber-wise inside three-letter agency. And now I'm working in a similar facet, but outside of that agency, to where, you know, I can talk to whoever I want about whatever I want. And, you know, it's all good to go there. And I was just talking to somebody a couple of days ago about this exact thing, where you have this built up paranoia of, you know, you do this, and some of it's paranoia, but some of it's legitimate security concerns. You know, it's like you have been approached by foreign adversaries, you have been, you know, followed by people, all those things. But then, you know, there is the extreme paranoia where it's like, is my thermostat watching me? You know? So my personal, I was very much, I still had a flip phone when I got out of the military and the agencies. I upgraded to an iPhone 5 circa 2019. And then all my buddies started making fun of me. The one with the refrigerator, he pulled up and he's like, I have 49 devices online at my house right now. I'm like, are you confident in those? And he was, you know, that was his personal, you know, he's like, yeah, I am 100% confident that those devices are secure, and I or my family are the only ones, you know. That's the authentication piece, to where, you know, and I was like, I'm not secure in that, in myself, because, you know, working inside those agencies, you are a huge team, and a lot of that stuff is taken care of for you, you know. Yeah. So it's like, am I comfortable enough to set my own system up? I'm not to where I can put 49 devices on, but, you know, I'm trying to get there, and I've got a smart thermostat now, and I've got, you know, all these home integrations that I would have never thought about 2 years ago.
Imran, do you have smart devices in your house? Are they Windows based, and do you trust them?
I think I have 49 smart devices around me right now. I was literally counting as we were talking, but it does go back to the question I think somebody in the audience also asked. Innovation, which is like my passion, it's from my childhood, innovation, and then today's reality, security first. Quite frankly, at the end of the day, convenience will always trump. In culture, it will always be there, because people will get addicted to the convenience. When I was CEO of EverTrack, the world's first moving map, location-aware asset tracking company, we worked with the DoD in Desert Storm 1, being able to track resources there. People at that time were afraid of the GPS chip being put in their phone. And people said, people will never accept it. And I said, they will, because the convenience factor will outweigh everything else. In terms of, does innovation get crippled by this security first? It might be slowed down, but I'll actually turn that question around, or that whole premise around, and say, innovation means being able to innovate with security at the heart of your thinking from day one. So it's actually 2 layers of innovation now. You're innovating in your smart device or whatever, but then you also innovate on the security piece of it. So it's a double opportunity for innovation and to make the world a better, more secure place, in my humble opinion.
Minerva, do you have many smart devices, and do you agree with the convenience first? Or do you think it really depends on the situation? I mean, you work with banks, you work with all sorts of folks where a lack of security is a big issue.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think I am, admit, people tell me I'm paranoid, so I'm going to take their word for it. But I do love to play with new things. And so I do try to experiment with, IoT, new technologies. I mean, there was a time where, Ryan, right? If you were a soldier, you couldn't have a Fitbit because with your GPS turned on, because guess what? People could figure out where the army was at any given time, based on their Fitbits. And so, I love Imran's notion of security first. I think the next innovation is going to have to be, how do we make security automatic? I think the biggest problem is, if just having a device or having a ring on your doorbell, you have to understand the security of it, know what level of encryption you need, and have all kinds of password saving devices. And so to me, next real innovation should be automatic security, sort of context sensitive, easy to use for the regular person, and have systems that are secure first, but also make it automatic, more automated.
So on that very note, AI, is that going to get us there? Should we have an end to passwords as they are at the moment? And social engineering. I mean, it seems three very different things, but it feels like our security on the whole still isn't where it should be. Ava, what do you think? I mean, is this an AI problem or solution? And how does this tie in with social engineering, which is still very, very good?
Yeah, I think, as I said, there's some pretty bad robots out there. And, I find every day I have to say 5 times that I am not a robot, right? I have to prove now that I'm not a robot to use the internet. Half the day I spend, clicking on things to prove I'm not a robot. But kidding aside, I think, AI can absolutely be helpful in detecting anomalies, strange patterns. There's lots of great software out there that'll do that. Look through your logs and check. I think, detecting those things is very important. Even more important is the response, right? So people, if you assume you're going to be hacked, I think it's still very people driven. What do you do in that case? What is your response? What is the level of, especially in finance, what is the level of notification, information sharing that you're required to do if there's a known attack happening? And because believe me, bad guys all talk to each other.
You're involved in a new bank. Is the security? Can't talk too much about it, but what's the general approach to security there?
Well, we did take a security first approach, because it would be based on your phone, and I think that was a key. It has to constantly be updated. So for example, one level of security won't be any good in a year or two, maybe, and those cycles are shortening even now as we speak. And so I think absolutely take a security first design when you have a brand new slate and you can create something from scratch. It was a unique opportunity to do that and see how that worked out. It did include, a kind of biometric passwordless approach with multiple factors built in, and it was context sensitive based on what you want to do. If you're just looking up your balance, that's one level. If you're wiring money, that's a different level, right? So you can think about things in a layered way when you have the luxury of building from scratch. When we put the Link NYC kiosks on the street, that was one of the first instances of free Wi-Fi with encryption, end-to-end encryption built in. You would create an individual token that was based on factors you decide, and those could not be tagged back to you as an individual. So it did preserve privacy and security at the same time. So when you have the opportunity to do things from scratch, it's certainly an opportunity to design them in a better way.
Oliver, we have a couple of questions from the audience. Maybe just take a little break and address them. One is from Paolo Vaca. To all the panelists, thoughts around the balance between security and innovation. Organizations want to be able to drive innovation, however, sometimes security first in some organizations cause innovation throttling. I don't know, what that means, but does anyone want to address that?
I think that's the one I addressed as it had popped onto the screen. So I think the follow-up comment was to that, I thought so. But I'm sure others have something else to add.
And the other one was from Esther Dyson. It seems to me that one standard around security should be liability for damages, which would give people, companies, an incentive to care. If they don't, their insurance companies will make them care. Look at what happened around fire with fire codes and liability, and insurance companies are looking at prevention versus just risk sharing. And she asked, comments, please.
So actually, I might expand on the question and just shape it a little bit. Companies at the moment are not being penalized particularly for security breaches. Is it time for insurance companies to lead the way and say, look, if you don't have good security, your premium is going to go up an awful lot? Do you think that could be a way of readdressing the market as we are at the moment?
Can I take that one?
Yes, please.
All right.
Yeah. So it's kind of your question and their question combined into the aspect of hands-on cybersecurity operations, right? And the problems with auditing, the problems with pen testing, the problems with vulnerability assessments is the fact that it's all about a moment in time, right? And that moment moves so quickly, whereas, you know, depending on the organization, depending on their land, their actual, exposure, it could be completely massive to where, you know, they may start the pen test, vulnerability test, audit, whatever, one day, and it may be a month and a half before you finish the whole thing, to where you've got 5 different patch cycles in there. You've started new programs. You may have, done a merger and acquisition in that time frame, and all these things. And if we start to put either penalties or insurance premiums, so proactive or reactive, whichever one you want to do, on a moment in time, well, then we're just going to prepare for that moment in time, right? And then the reality is, it comes down to, hey, the auditor's coming, get everything lined up, and it's just going to end up like that, to where one of my buddies, he has in a signature block, hey, the hacker only has to be right once, right? So they're also just a moment in time, but their moment in time is so much faster, and it's deterministic, right? So ransomware, you guys have probably all seen it, the aspect of most of the time the hacker stays in the environment for 180 days before he actually triggers it, right?
Yeah.
And the reason isn't so they can propagate. The reason is so they can find out what's of value to the company, right? Because what's of value to me as a hacker may be drastically different what's of value to the actual company themselves, right? So they're looking for things that aren't of value to them. They're looking for things that are of value to the actual company. So we can say, hey, we saw all your traffic go by for 6 months. We found out what was the most important thing to you, and now we have it. So how much do you pay for it?
So I'm going to ask the thorny question, which is, how do we incentivize companies to improve security, or is it going to be market-led?
So my personal opinion on this, and I say it's personal because it's not necessarily supported by data, it's supported more from the aspect of reading people, right? And it's not so much that people don't take security seriously. There are some bad people out there that are like, hey, that just costs too much, I don't care. They can, have the crown jewels, right? Doesn't matter to me. But I really feel like it's a disconnect between the operational and the person asking the question, whether that be the executive, whether it be the board member, whether that be the auditor, to where we have this old school mindset to where we've got that under control. It's like, hey, what about this? We've got that under control. And that may be true, but you're not giving them a realistic picture of what it is that they're asking about, right? So the example being, hey, I heard about, solar winds or Kaseya. I heard about these things. What can you tell me about it in our environment, right? And it's like, we got it under control. Well, okay, we got it under control, but what is the actual realistic picture within our environment? So I think that mindset, that old school mindset, needs to be removed, and we have trust within one another as both leadership and subordinate, and we have this honest to goodness transparency within our company, so that those people up at the top that are those decision makers and those policy makers have a realistic vision versus, we got it under control. And it's like,
I think it's a combination of these audits as well as, the controls and processes in place that are ongoing, right? And so, well, you're auditing in time, but you want to have an established set of access controls, access reviews that are continuous, the vigilance on the part of not just the security ops team, but the individual employees themselves, and frankly, a security culture, right, to sort of put people into it. I think that may be, the most important shift is to change a company culture to have a more security focus in every employee.
If I may.
Yeah, please, Imran.
Full disclosure, my day job is with Microsoft, but I don't speak on behalf of Microsoft. This is my personal opinion. Obviously, there are regulations in place. There are liabilities that companies and others undertake when they do business. If a bank has a massive breach and loses data and is hit with millions in fines, there's nothing stopping them from hitting their software vendor. In addition, I think the market itself also penalizes bad security. So even the platform we are speaking on right now did suffer from some of that bad press in the past. Even in the case of if you're a large company, the fact that you have a breach can literally have a financial impact, which could be bigger than anybody giving you a $100 million fine, and your market capitalization dropped by $2 billion the next day. That's a much bigger penalty, quite frankly. So those things are built into the market systems. Can they be better? Yes, absolutely. If you're a medium-sized company, you could be driven out of business. If you're a startup who did something that was insecure, you won't get funding and will not exist. So those things already play out. I think, again, one of the things that I said earlier was we need security to be part and parcel of the thinking, from operations to design to architecture to literally even like discussing financial details of things at every part of society. And without that, it would be like you'll still always have an Achilles heel, which will get you in trouble. And that's where the role of the US government can be as much inwards looking, ensuring that there is more and more of a focus on InfoSec and other types of security at the business and organization and individual levels, but that there are laws on the books that do hold the people who are the bad robots, as Minerva said, that they are held to account. It's not a slap on the wrist. And if there are nation state actors at play, it is time that they paid some price. It doesn't have to be nukes fired off at a country, but just saying, hey, we can do things to you is not going to cut it anymore. And that's why I think it's top to bottom, all of us are in this together. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Oliver,
let's for a second talk about good robots. Building good robots, some of the approaches, and also some of the skills and people needed to do this. Minerva, do you want to go first? Because I think we all need good robots right now.
Sure. Well, I mean, there actually is a lot of work being done, particularly in finance, to detect money laundering, trafficking patterns, catching the bad guys with fake crypto wallets and things like that. All really good, robot work. I think, part of it is not to think of it as an extra thing, right? So if we made it a requirement for IoT to all have a security framework that went with it, that would be a big help, right? Why should the user have to set that up? There should already be some standards, security standards for all IoT devices, right? And that those standards are updated and patched and so forth. I think when we think about connected things, we don't actually think about the fact that, well, that was just a trash can before, and now it's a connected trash can. that might detect, people's phone numbers walking by. So those things have to be, set up in advance, instead of kind of playing good robot after the bad guys. So I think there's a good robot, and then there's the good robot framework that has to go with it.
Yeah, Ryan, how would you build a good robot? What's most important to you?
I would definitely say anything starting with the security mindset, right? Because the aspect of bolting on security never works holistically, right? But kind of to echo a little bit of what Minerva said, it just kind of made me think of, like I said, I worked for a power company before my current position, and some of the public libraries that were utilized, that the public library would be in the code base, right? Would end up with some type of configuration issue. And some of these, when you think about power utilities, a lot of those were kind of the original IoT devices, because you can't travel the hundreds of miles to go, fix your SCADA system out in the middle of nowhere. So they've been remotely accessing those for quite a while. And with that, we came up with some issues a couple years ago to where I believe one of the public libraries had like 22 vulnerabilities in it. Another one had like 11 in it. And the reality is that public library was written in the 90s, and it's still being utilized today, right? Security wasn't a thing in the 90s, holistically. It was kind of,
so you'd like a more updated good robot, or not?
Yeah, exactly.
A good robot just to update things, maybe it's enough.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the reality of something being used for 30 years and having no issues whatsoever, and then all of a sudden people start poking around at it, they're like, this isn't secure at all. But even the company that created it didn't exist, but they didn't have any accountability to like even who was using it or anything. It was completely just this wide open door of, yep, we have no idea, right? So no matter what it is you build, building with that security first mindset to, future proof it more than anything.
Imran, I'll ask you almost the same question, and you can use this as a recruitment pitch for Microsoft. But what are the skills needed to build new robots, good robots of tomorrow?
So I'll use the previous topic as a segue, the previous statement by Ryan. As I said earlier, right, security first has to be the mindset. And future proofing is, of course, a great ideal, but at the same time, we don't want to be claiming to be so smart that we've already imagined what the world will be like 30 years from now. I want to be surprised by things 5 years from now, or even 2 years from now. And at the same time, we can aspire to be a more, wonderful union and a greater society and a greater world. But at the same time, we're not living in utopia. So there is never going to be a time or a place where everything is going to be perfect, where cars will not have accidents, people will not do something stupid, and bad actors or bad robots will not jump in. We'll have to ensure that we also understand what we have to give up for that aspiration of perfect security. What about our aspiration of perfect privacy, for example? There are trade-offs to be made. Even as a Pakistani-born Muslim American, I would not want to live in Saudi Arabia, regardless of how much money I was given and how much security I had, if I cannot have free thought and the freedom of speech. And so part of what makes us human is something we have to make sure that we embrace the surprises of life, the risks of life, even the happy and unhappy sometimes accidents of life are part of what life is, what makes us human. So if we don't lose sight of that, if we keep that human element in our design of processes, if I am an engineer, if I'm a developer, if I am a UX designer, if I keep in mind that I want the world to be a better place, not a perfect place, a safer place, not the perfect place, I think you already have the credentials to be a great developer of whatever the future holds.
Fantastic. So, talking of safer and better places, I've got one last question for the panel. What is one piece of software or one app or something you love, which you feel makes things safer for you? Imran, we'll start with you.
That's going to be a loaded question for me because I love using Microsoft Teams, as you all know.
Oh, no, come on, something new, something not Microsoft. What do you use on your phone or what's an app you use often?
To be quite honest, the best security app on the planet, whether you use an iPhone or a Windows laptop or a Mac OS device, is your own brain and your own head. Before you click on something, before you open a file, before you send a message, think. That's the best AI, actually best real AI. I think we're living in a time where AI, I always tell you that artificial intelligence will never be able to overcome natural stupidity. So as long as you can keep a hold of that mind and put that to good use, we should be fine.
Fantastic. Ryan, what about you? What apps or security devices, software, what do you love?
I mean, can we name drop here? Or
Absolutely, yes, please do.
Okay. So an app that I started using a few years ago is called Armor Text. And it's just secure communications. It's encrypted at both the application layer and the device layer. So, and it is portable across devices. It works on all different platforms and everything, you know, mobile and desktop and everything. But the reality is, in the communities that I work in, right, and all the different agencies, and like I said, the authorities, right? So something at this agency may be classified at this level, and something at this agency might be classified at a different level. So it becomes kind of gray whenever we have threat intelligence, you know. And of course, the platform itself, Armor Text, is not classified, right? But it just kind of gives you this sense of, okay, I know who I'm talking to. I know that what I am talking about is secure, and I don't have to necessarily self-censor. I can share those things, and the operations that I do are global, you know, and the idea that I can, you know, do it on my work laptop versus my cell phone, and it's the exact same conversations, you know, because like I said, the encryption across the devices can be read into each other. It's made my life a whole heck of a lot easier and kind of given me a warm fuzzy more than anything.
Fantastic. I'll get you to put the link in the chat if you could. Minerva, you have the last words. What devices, apps, what do you love? What makes you feel more secure?
Well, I pretty much use all of them, and I rotate them. So different password keepers, different firewalls, different ones. As sort of change is the only constant. I think this sort of notion that as long as I'm moving target, I have less chance to get hit. But Imran's totally on right, which is your own brain is your best weapon against these preferably a paranoid brain. I do want to make one last plug, which is for those students in the audience. You know, I hope this has inspired you to think about cybersecurity as a career. I think it's a fantastic, very fascinating, multidisciplinary area. And if you love this sort of thing, you know, definitely pursue a career in cyber.
Absolutely. Use your head to make the world a better place.
Fantastic. Well, on that note, thank you, panelists, very much indeed for a very exciting conversation. It's been fantastic. And just two quick notices. To anyone watching, let us know what technologies you'd like us to discuss here, and also what speakers you would like to hear from. So send us an email at the usual address, which is info@disruptivetechnologists.com, and we'll try and make that happen. Next week, there should be a fireside chat, so do send in any questions you'd like to be answered, and see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a great week. See you next week.
I know.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye.